This one ultimately hasn't, but it has allowed me to erase the codes, which ultimately has changed the running of my car. Hopefully for the better. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we're back out on the Audi TT Mark 1. And in particular, I need to run an OBD test, that's an onboard diagnostics test, really to check that everything is working as it should be. I have a sneaky suspicion that my Audi TT has had some sort of remap or change to the engine that ultimately gives it more boost. And I think these engines can be cranked right up if you want to. There's a lot of various mappings that can be done to this car. So I want to check that, but equally I want to check if there's any error codes, because I keep getting the flash of a warning light on the brake lights. This can be a common fault really when your brake lights or one of the filaments have gone and the circuit hasn't connected properly. It's a bit intermittent, so I think maybe it might be a dodgy bulb, but I just want to check if there's any codes in general on the car. So let's have a look at the actual test unit itself and get out there and run some tests. Okay, so here's the car diagnostic tool that I've ordered to help me find any issues with the Audi TT, the small project that I'm running on the side next to my Porsche 924 project. Ideally, this will give me some sort of insight to anything that might be amiss, even if there's not a check warning light that appears. So it gives you a bit more, I guess, of a deeper dive into the car electronics and sensors and all of that good stuff. So cars here, as it says, from 1996 generally were fitted with this type of setup to allow you really to, I guess, fault find without having to rip things apart. On the 924, you have to rip things apart before you can find out ultimately if the part or the component is not doing what it should be doing. So let's have a quick look at this, just so you can see. It's generally a pretty simple setup. As you can see, that is the plug that plugs into the car. On the Audi TT, it's under the steering wheel to the right hand side where the bonnet release catch is. And yeah, let's get out there and ultimately see what we've got in terms of codes that might be amiss. Okay, so here is the footwell of the TT, and there is the connector that you need to join your diagnostic tool to, which is just next to the boot or the bonnet release catch. So let's get this connected and see what we can find out. Okay, so we've got the diagnostics tool connected in the port by the footwell. Next is really to make sure that this thing is connected and is able to talk to the car. So ideally we put on the ignition. We have lights are good. Let's pick the diagnostic test, press OK. And hopefully we get firstly a good connection and then a reading that we have no faults. Okay, so we have to turn the ignition off and then back on. Rerun the test just to make sure that the car can talk to the unit. Okay, so we are connected. Okay, so we've got no bad codes that have come up, so no faults with the engine or any of the electricals or anywhere that has ultimately sensors that this should be reading, which is good. I did expect a code for the lights. I have got, I think they're slightly different lights that ultimately don't fit with the CAN bus, but yeah, sometimes it comes up, sometimes it doesn't. So I was expecting to see something there, but it hasn't. Anyway, that is that. I'm going to start the engine now, and we're going to start to look at some of the, I guess, the measurements while the car is running. So let's do that. Okay, go back to the main menu. Yes, and let's see what we've got here. Well, that's good to know that we're going at 0 miles an hour. Not good to do a test while you're moving. Okay, so car is warming up. Coolant temperature I expect to be, again, very low as that warms up. Engine revs, okay, they'll be high as the engine warms up, and then that should drop down gradually to the right RPM at idle. So those are the checks that I wanted to just double check to make sure they are working as they should be. Okay, so I've taken the car for a run after running the diagnostic test. I'm going to restart the test again with the engine in the ignition position. One thing I just did while it was just ticking over after I'd come back from a quick run is reset the codes. So although the hasn't connected again, so let's turn that off. Let's press OK. Let's pick the engine diagnostics again, turn the ignition on, press OK. Hopefully it will reconnect. Yeah, so one thing I just did after doing the run, the engine was running a little, in some parts it was running a little strange, so almost like a hiccup. Now that could be coil packs, sensor, there's a whole bunch of things it could be. What I did is, even though there was no codes that ultimately had been picked up, I pressed erase codes, and suddenly the engine just seemed massively smoother. And one thing that has changed hugely is my miles per gallon. So again, I took this car for a run for, I don't know, about 10 minutes or so. That miles per gallon was generally around the 17 maybe to 19 mark, depending on how you drove. And that's not on the long run, that's just sort of around the usual streets and so on. What I've done now is nearly 25 miles per gallon, doing exactly the same as what I was doing before, and that was after erasing the codes. So something has changed for the better. And as I said, the tone of the engine after I pressed erase codes also seemed a lot smoother, not just at idle but also throughout the gears. So I don't know, maybe this thing doesn't show all of the details as it might do if it was a much more expensive unit. This was about, I think I paid 15 quid for this unit. It's like, honestly, it's peanuts. So the bigger, better units, obviously hundreds of pounds, you will be able to read in detail what's going on. This one ultimately hasn't, but it has allowed me to erase the codes, which ultimately has changed the running of my car, hopefully for the better. Time will tell. But that is a quick rundown of an OBD 2 unit that plugs into my Audi TT Mark 1 and has allowed me to ultimately check if there was any issues and erase codes that ultimately might not have been seen, and has ultimately changed the car for what seemingly is the better. I hope that you found that useful, just going through those steps of ultimately how to connect it, how to test for codes, and then if it does help, erase codes as well. And yeah, I'll report back if this has done some good in the long term. But thanks again for watching, thanks for the support, and the next video will be along very soon.